Well, now we shall go ahead with the next term, didactic literature. Well, didactic literature refers to what we call a type of literature that is written to inform or instruct the reader. It is the term didactism describes, a moral or political lessons. It is used in the context of a moral teaching or giving a moral or political lesson to the readers. And when we talk about the origin of the term didactism, it comes from the ancient Greek word didaktikos, and it meant relating to teaching, education, or wisdom. Okay, the word didaktikos in Greek meant relating to teaching, education, or wisdom. So the origin of the words must have made you aware of the fact that most of the English words, terms, and concepts come from either Greek or Latin. Okay, there is a very great influence of Greek and Latin language on European languages, especially on English, French, etc. Now, didactic literature also mean to entertain the audience. It does not mean that the didactic literature was only for teaching. It is also meant to entertain the readers. There is, the aesthetic quality in didactic work. Aesthetic means the beauty, appealing sense, use of imagery, style, etc. So there is the aesthetic in didactic work of literature, but they are subordinate. They are secondary. In didactic literature, entertainment and aesthetics are less important, are subordinate to the message it tries to give, it imparts. So, didactic literature has a moral, religious, or philosophical purpose. Okay? Or it aims to explore, expound a branch of knowledge. You can see the example in Virgil, a Roman writer, Virgil's Georgics. Okay, we come across his attempt to expound a branch of knowledge. A didactic literature is different from imaginative works because in imaginative works, the aesthetic product has primary importance. The aesthetic side of literature takes precedence over any moral intent. Aesthetic means, I told you, aesthetics is related to beauty, the appealing sense of literature, the beautiful use of language, the beautiful use of structure, imagery, symbols, etc. Means form becomes important, not the message. In case of imaginative literature, but in didactic literature, form is less important than message. And when we talk about the famous examples of didactism, you can take the example of John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress. It's very famous didactic work. Then Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist is yet another example. And if you read a poem by Rudyard Kipling, it's actually a poem in which uh, a father or no an elderly person is trying to give advice to his son or some a younger person. If the title of the poem is if you could keep your mind, is despite of the odd situations, if you are able to keep your calm, maintain your calmness in all kind of odd circumstances. You'll be able to win the world itself. That's what Kipling tries to convey. I'm sure that you must have studied this poem in your 12th or 10th standard. If you could, that's the title. If only if is the title, original title, but sometimes it is titled as with the first line of the poem. If you could keep your mind. Okay, so these are the examples of didactic literature, wherein you want to give some message. Message takes precedence over form. Okay, now let's go ahead with the next term. It is diegesis. Okay, and the word diegesis comes from the Greek word digestai, which means to lead, to guide through, to lead someone, to guide someone through the path of life. So the word diegesis denotes indirect representation of actions or thoughts by the narrator, which is in contrast to mimesis. Mimesis is a direct imitation, a direct representation, resembling a show on a stage. Mimesis is a drama, it is a direct representation, whereas diegesis is an indirect representation of actions or thoughts by the narrator. It's not a drama as such. And when we talk about its historical origin, diegesis is used by Plato in his famous discourse, Republic, where Plato assumed the role of a narrator. It's not Plato who talks, it is the narrator who talks about actions or thoughts. And another example is Aristotle's Poetics, which you're going to study. You're going to study some chapters from Poetics in your unit number 1, Classical Criticism. Okay, so that is an example of diegesis. So for the ancient authors like Plato, Aristotle, etc., the identity of the speaker was a determinate factor. And this particular speaker had the voice of an authorial narrator. Means he had that command over, which was in correspondence to diegesis. And the voice of other agents in the same text is mimesis. Okay, mimesis, I told you, was the term used by Plato and Aristotle to describe tragedy or to describe drama. Drama is mere representation. Okay, it is an imitation of imitation. You must have studied some classical criticism in your TUI-BA. Well, so diegesis was a category that included both plain diegesis, which is plain diegesis means told by a single narrator, and diegesis by mimesis itself. Mimesis means other group of characters, narrators. We just now understood. Okay, diegesis and the voice of other agents in the text is mimesis. Apart from the single narrator, other narrators are there, so they are the examples of mimesis. Now, when we talk about the change in the word, meaning of the word, means the meaning of the word diegesis has undergone some changes over time. It is called a diachronic change. So the diegesis, mimesis, when we understand this dichotomy, As you are going to understand the dichotomy, Saussure's dichotomy, lang parole, okay, form and content, etc. Diachronic, synchronic, okay, syntagmatic and paradigmatic dichotomy. Similarly, here as well, this dichotomy, diegesis, mimesis dichotomy has evolved. Evolve means to change slowly, gradually. Evolution is a gradual change in opposite to revolution. Revolution is sudden change. Evolve means to change gradually, slowly, without getting being noticed. For example, we talk about the evolution of man. Okay, the theory of evolution proposed by Charles Darwin. Evolution is a very slow, gradual, unseen change. It occurs for centuries together, for several centuries, we can say. Whereas French Revolution occurs suddenly. Okay, so dichotomy has evolved from this particular dichotomy. I'm talking about diegesis, mimesis, has evolved from meaning two modes of telling, to telling and showing. Okay, it comes from telling and showing. Means from telling, now it has come to showing. But still, the voice plays an important role in understanding this term, diegesis. A single narrator, that is the voice of a single narrator. So, told by the narrator, diegesis is a summary of events. Even I think Coleridge uses in his book Biographia Literaria this kind of diegesis. When we talk about Samuel Johnson, he also uses the same method. Milton has used it very effectively. Okay, so told by the narrator, diegesis is a summary of events, which inevitably filters out chunks and pieces of the actual happenings. It takes only important chunks, events, not all happening. In case of mimesis, in case of story, what happens? All events are taken. So only important chunks and pieces of the actual happenings from the narrator's perspective are filtered. So diegesis, in short, in other words, in simple words, is the telling of a story by a narrator. Here, the narrator may speak as a particular character or maybe the invisible narrator. He may be the all-knowing, omniscient narrator who speaks from outside in the form of commentator, commenting on the action or the characters. So third person narration we say, third person point of view. So it is the hypothetical world of a story. Hypothetical means assumed, taken for granted, as if it actually existed in a real space and time. So digest is the illusory universe. And universe, the universe of illusion, bhas म्हणतो आपण त्याला. Okay, universe of story created by its linguistic structure. And when we talk about its modern use, the famous literary critic Gerard Genette explains diegesis in a different manner. We are talking about the change that has taken place from Plato to present modern period. So Gerard Genette suggests that diegesis is a level of narration. It is a level of narration. The extra diegetic level is about the main story and its world. And the diegetic level consists of the main story. Look, there are two levels. One is the extra diegetic level, and the other one is the diegetic level. What is the extra diegetic level? It is about the main story and its world, as we call it metaphysical. Okay, and the diegetic level consists of the main story. And there is one more type level. that is hypodiegetic level. Okay, hypodiegetic level refers is used for stories inside the main story. So there are three levels in diegesis. One is the extra diegetic level, which is about the main story and its world. Then the diegetic level, which is the main story itself, and the hypodiegetic level, which is the stories from inside the main story, story within story. We talk about a simple plot, complex plot. Okay, in complex plot we have the main story and other small stories. So hypodiegetic level refers to that. And the extra, now what is the function of this particular level then? The extra diegetic level serves as an outward limit to the extent of the diegetic level of narrative. It is a kind of outward limit. Okay, means it is the level in which a narrator outside the world of the characters, third person narration. He is not the part of the story. It is a narrator who describes things from a distance. He is not related to the characters in the story. So most of the stories, novels, etc., are written from third person point of view. So that is what this extra diegetic level is. Okay, and a perfect example of such a novel fiction, which includes all these dimensions, okay, is James Joyce's very famous work, The Dead. Okay, so this is how we understand the concept diegesis.